Weghamar, شوي area crossroads.
Hello everybody, and welcome again to the latest episode of Walk the Crossroads. Tonight we'll be doing a small overview of DasWyrd Press and the upcoming project known as ThreeFold Seer Volume 1, Those Apart, the first upcoming novella in the Songbird trilogy. Now, for those of you who are not in the know, or don't listen to my podcast, or don't read my blog, I am launching, as Padraig O'C, a independent publishing house known as DasWyrd Press. DasWyrd will aim to basically galvanize a new generation of authors. We hope to give creating credit back to the authors and to the creators themselves. We want to act as guardians, or effectively curators, of good stories and good content. Publishing in general is evolving. It's seen a mass digitalization, as we're learning in my publishing class. And one thing we want to do as DasWyrd staff is take ownership of what kind of content we're putting out. We will take responsibility, and we will try to curate in a fashion that helps to not only spread diversity, but also provides people the ability to write stories of empowerment and also explore stories that may have not been seen in the mainstream. Anyway, off the small pedestal and back into what we're talking about tonight. The ThreeFold Seer series is inspired by Avatar and The Legend of Korra, not to mention Zelda, and also the Steven Universe series. The major tropes it carries will be mostly focusing on the notion of a large open ocean, diverse peoples, with deconstructions of previous fantasy notions, with a heavy emphasis on magical girl. And the reason why we're doing magical girl, because, well, why not? Anyway, the basis of this world is that there are people that are simply called shaman. Shaman have the ability to connect to a given element, such as sea, stone, and sky. That's where the name comes from. Anyway, stone shaman have the ability to communicate with animals of the land. They can even help plants grow. They can feel the movement of stone and sense earthquakes. Sky shaman have the ability to speak to animals of the air. They can also feel the movements of winds and can foretell, the coming of storms and other things. And then sea shaman can speak to animals and feel the movements of the waters. Shaman also have the ability to speak to the dead and a few other crazy little abilities. As you guys have noticed, we're taking kind of an Avatar, The Last Airbender bent with these. We're trying to keep things a little bit simple, while at the same time creating a new notion of elementalism. We're kind of going beyond the traditional four elements, and we're trying to create our own sense here, while actually giving respect to traditional notions. Many of our inspirations comes from Asia with the 5 elements, and we're hoping to kind of set ourselves apart when we create this story. But we're not making this different to be the sake of different. We're doing this as a kind of a thought experiment. Anyway, this is what we're going to be calling Shaman Punk, which is that shamans will power technology and a new revolution. The beginning of the series is set after the previous seers. Those who speak for the goddesses, the most powerful of shaman, have been annihilated, and a new bloodline needs to be created. So the goddesses of the sea, of stones, and of sky, have decided to select 3 new individuals to become the shamans of sky, stone, and sea. In this instance, we'll be dealing with individuals who not only are trans, androgynous, and we're still deciding on the final seer. We'll be seeing people who deal not only with gender difference, but also racial and linguistic difference, some of the big heralds of my previous writing. In this instance, we'll be dealing with 2 peoples that simply just do not get along, and the third, who everybody thinks is kind of a bunch of country bumpkins. Part of the story will be heavily influenced by the historical Japanese period. For those of you who don't know, this is called the Warring States period, or in Japanese, the Sengoku Jidai, and our 3 major heroes will be inspired by the 3 major uniters of that period, along with the coming of King Kamehameha in the Hawaiian Islands. We are trying to tell a story of unification, and also how people take different ways on after unification occurs across a land, and how cultural differences are dealt with. In this new series, we'll introduce 2 new languages, the first being Skeo, the second being Tashik. both which will have their own words and have their own vocabularies, but will share a common root language. There will also be a secondary dialect of Scale, which represents the northern tribe, who are distant relatives of the speakers of Scale, who are the Skybound Kingdoms. Every nation or people, as we call them, will have their own connection to specific animals. The Skybound tend to connect with birds, the Whale clans, well, that's self-explanatory, and the Clouded Mountain tribe tends to connect with leopards. So yes, people, there are people who ride in the battle on leopards. How is that not awesome? Or on whales. Okay. We will be using, fun ecology while at the same time making up our own animals. We're going to follow kind of an Avatar: The Last Airbender influence there. Kind of keep it simple, keep it fun. And at the same time, we'll also be kind of making things a bit serious like we often see in Zelda, with kind of a slight emphasis on MacGuffins and also an extended history of binding three souls across space and time. For those of you who are interested, this will be an independently funded notion. We would love to take donations. I'm putting this here because we're still working that out, but when it is, I'll put it down the diddly-do or on my website. We are hoping to launch this as our first official published novel. We are going to be expanding our team to include editors, a consultant, and also some readers and a proofreader. And we're hoping that by launching this, we can show that not only are we producing something that has its own unique art style, but also that we as a team can come together and accomplish something. Not to mention, this will be our first major foray into producing our part of our overall meta brand known as O'C. Now, the one thing I want to note here is that not only does FC Stone Sky have a simple notion and uniqueness when it comes to character design, everything, it has no Eurocentrism. None of the characters in this game, in this story, are taking any influence from Europeans. In fact, I've been mostly using cultures from the Pacific here. At the same time, along with the custom names and the influence in custom languages, we're not just ripping names from the Aleutian Islands or from Tagalog names. Everything to a point is original in that we're trying to keep things inspired, but we're not just making magical Polynesia, magical Japan, or magical Native Americans. We're trying to seriously provide a unique take on modern fantasy. Well, fantasy in the notion of people who are shamans riding whales, not as in, steampunk. Anyway, I know this has been kind of a short episode, but I wanted to keep things brief, mostly because the actual build-up here has been a little crazy and I'm still adjusting to life. But if you guys have any questions, just ask them down in the diddly-do. We will be having more small updates here on the podcast infrequently as the project proceeds, and we will be having several updates as things go along while we finish up production and we move into marketing next year. Anyway, everybody, thank you for listening to this very short explanatory episode. If you are interested, I will include a link to our page for DasWyrd in the diddly-do. If you have any questions, just ask. And anyway, as the Amazons say, Vehen shush.